Are we ready then? Firstly, can I apologise for the late start of the meeting? The clock in the Conservative group room was not correct, and we suddenly realised it was 6 o'clock and we thought it was 5 to. Poor excuse, but there we are. Are we streaming? Thank you. Can I welcome you to this evening's meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee? I'm Dennis Willits, Councillor for Lexton and Braeswick Ward, and I'm chairing the meeting this evening. The meeting, as you know, is being held in the Moot Hall, and it's being broadcast live via Zoom over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel, where it will be available to watch afterwards. To begin with, there are the usual matters of housekeeping. Action in the event of emergency. No practice alarms planned for this evening, so if the alarm sounds, evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the high street, and then we assemble in the car park behind the town hall in Runwell Street to be counted. For those attending here in the Moot Hall, I can assure you that a risk assessment, including COVID risks, has been undertaken for this meeting. Can I remind everyone to remain seated and socially distanced within 2 metres between seats. Please do not move the chairs. Masks can be removed when seated. With the exception of the Democratic Services Officer advising us, would participants, both those joining us online and in the Moot Hall, please mute their microphones unless they are about to speak. I will announce by name and invite to speak those participants wishing to make representations to the committee in the order of business to be conducted. We'll have a short break at 8 p.m. If there's still business to be carried out. Can I ask members of the committee and officers supporting this committee to introduce themselves, starting on my right?
Councillor Lee Tate for Prettygoat Ward.
Councillor David King, Mile End.
Councillor Michelle Burrows, Wivenhoe Ward.
Councillor Kevin Bentley, Marks Town, Lair Ward.
Councillor Steph Nissen, Castle Ward.
Councillor Adam Fox, Old Heath, Hyde and Rowhedge.
Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. We have an apology from Councillor G. Oxford. Are there any substitutions, or are we all here in our own capacity? No, good. No substitutions. No urgent items. Any declarations of interest? Take that as none. Minutes of the previous meeting. Is it your wish that we confirm the minutes of the meeting 27th of July 2021 as the correct record? Thank you, colleagues. Have your say. I don't see anyone in the public gallery wishing to speak. So that takes us on to the first item of real business on the agenda. On page 21 of the order paper, the financial monitoring report for the 3 months April to June 2021. Paul Cook, Head of Finance, should be here with us on Zoom, and Mark Jarvis might be somewhere on the horizon. So, Paul, are you presenting?
Thank you, Chair. This is the first quarterly monitoring report for financial year 21-22, and it shows that the expected outturn is 140,000 on the general fund, 146,000, and for the housing revenue account, expected to balance to the budget by the year end. So I think given all the ups and downs of COVID, that's a very satisfactory financial management position. And in the report, it does set out from section 4 onward some of the main variations against budget. And in the appendices, there's quite a bit of detail provided. We certainly have benefited from the first quarter that MHCLG income loss grant has still applied. So that's helped our position significantly. So I think, Chair, with all the difficulties of the recent past, it's quite a good prospect moving forward to get within budget in the current financial year, moving forward to setting next year's budget. Thank you.
It's always difficult at the end of the first quarter to predict what it will be at the end of the year, but we are assured that that we're on an even keel at the moment. I have one question. There are references in places to the income loss compensation scheme from government, but the funds that we receive on income loss are not actually shown anywhere in the report against the service items to which they relate. So while we can see how a particular service line is doing, we don't really know whether it is a good position or a bad position when we take into account the income loss scheme. And I'm not sure whether that is a resolvable issue or whether we just live with it for the time being.
Certainly, Chair, if that would be okay, we could circulate something after the meeting, which gave a more detailed breakdown. We certainly do have that information because we have to make a very detailed return to MHCLG. So if that would be helpful, we could circulate it for Q1 after the meeting, or we could come back with more detail. We will bring forward Q2's monitoring report, whichever you prefer. Thank you.
If the information is readily available, I would like to see it as soon as possible. I mean, not ultra urgent, but rather than waiting for the next monitoring report.
Yes, we'll do that then, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Bentley.
Well, thank you, Chair. And just taking up that theme, I think is part of good governance. I think all future monitoring reports should contain that information. I know we'll come to the end where we won't be having money from government anymore, but nonetheless, it's useful for the public to understand where the money has come from, how much we got and how we've used that. So I think as part of these future monitoring reports, we should have attached, actually, maybe even the declaration we put in, it's a public document, one assumes, so therefore we should see that as well. And then we're very clear, the public's very clear about what monies this council has received.
Are there any? Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul, and to the team. Bear with a little bit of echo. I don't just mean the moot all. I too think it's good discipline to show clearly where we stand, particularly when it comes to something so significant as government support, given that can be contentious. And I think we should neutralise it. We all, regardless of party, want to track where government stands against its various promises to this local authority as it does to others. So I would welcome some clarity on that after tonight. One clarification or two, if I may, Chair, and I'll start at the beginning, Paul. I got a bit caught up, and I'm willing to accept, now that might well be me, in the language of the first point, which is the general fund shows a net overspend, less expenditure and less income. And I just couldn't quite get that straight in my head. So you've got an overspend, so you've got expenditure of 884, less income of 107, gave you 777. And I was finding myself thinking, how did that work? But this may be me. I'll pick up that later on, Paul, when I meet you next to understand the balance. My more significant, more substantial point is really if you could give a bit of clarification to the committee about how you see that forecast of 146k relative to the whole of the year. It's the first quarter. So how does this stand with what you'd had expected? How does this stand against what you would have expected this time of year? It is unique, but some sort of sense of where we are against that view on the whole year. The degree of certainty you have perhaps would be helpful. So a certainty point, Paul, and that links in turn to 411 and 412, where there's a reference to savings on interest payable 300k and an additional 300k in income support. That suggests a 600k improvement. So could you sort of just confirm that the 600k is factored in to our calculation about 146 away at the end? And just give us some sort of sense of the risks and variables to the forecast, accepting, as I say, that it's just one quarter in.
Thank you, Councillor King. Yes, those figures are factored in. I think in terms of where we are at this stage of the financial year, it is difficult, as the Chair was saying, in quarter one, because there's still reversals of last year's accruals and there's not a lot of information to work on. And managers tend to be quite prudent in forecasting in quarter one for those reasons. So I think where we are at the moment, that is quite a promising result. And some financial years, we've seen a higher overspend forecast in quarter one, which drops away. So I think that is a good position, but because of the unusual circumstances, we do need to watch that quite carefully. So I'm happy with how things are shaping up, but we do need to be vigilant as we're not certain about long-term economic recovery and how quickly services can get back to normal. So a good position at this stage, but one we need to watch quite carefully. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, certainly I would agree with Councillor King that the wording was just a little ambiguous in the second sentence, but it's clearly stated in the table in 4.8 where it shows how the 146,000 net overspend is derived from the service budgets and the technical corporate items. And of course, it's always a bit of a mind bender what the brackets mean when expenditure is bracketed or not bracketed and income is bracketed or not bracketed, remembering whether they're pluses or minuses. So one has to stay alert. But I think at the end of the day, it is a correct figure. Any other, Councillor King, you wish to?
Bear with me, Chair, two supplementaries. Paul, there's a huge amount of detail here, as there always is. I think without going into too many of the line items, because again, it's one quarter in, keep saying the same thing. I would just like to ask for Dan, if you could give us a few words around what looks at a glance to be the area of most volatility and pressure, which is the environment and waste service. That's not unusual. The explanation, there is an explanation there. Could you just give us some sort of sense of what managerially is being done to, in the circumstances, ensure we get the best grip we can?
I'll be happy to, David, although actually Rosa Tanfield's in the meeting. I think she's better qualified than me to talk about the steps that she's taking as group manager for that service area, if she's happy to join in.
Hello, good evening. Hopefully you can all hear me. Can I ask? Can you repeat the point, please, and then I can cover that.
Rosa, the question was really about the degree of pressure and the managerial response to it in the waste environment area. Everybody here understands that this is not a new pressure. Year on year, it's a challenging area. But I thought it would be right if you could just give a sense of where you are and where we're going in terms of getting, a fresh grip as we hopefully emerge from the pandemic. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're quite right. The last 18 months or so have been an incredibly challenging time for the service, not only in trying to support and maintain the service, but making sure that we're protecting our workforce and keeping them safe in order to be able to deliver that service. It has had an impact on the ability to provide the service in terms of staffing levels, so things such as self-isolation, sickness, etc. And that does apply pressure to us, and we manage that through redeployment of our staff and using agency to ensure that we can continue to deliver that important service every day to every resident across the borough. And that has continued through to the current day, but at a less pressure than this time last year. So we continue to see some difficulties in making sure that our staff are in work and fit and well, but we're providing lots of support and measures to ensure that they are able to do that. It continues to be a struggle, but it is being managed incredibly closely, and we're keeping a very close eye on the budgets to ensure that we're providing continued value for money, but delivering the really important core services to every resident, as I say. And we're not in a position where we have had to be in the past in looking at reducing services in any way. So we continue to deliver that and deliver that really well and really robustly. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Thank you. Chair, I've got one recommendation to you, if I may, if the committee agree, which is that it goes to your point earlier about where we stand in a volatile year and the need for us to have as much confidence as we can. I think it's a natural refinement of normal work, but it's about us seeing the risk analysis, at least in a very summary sense. My suggestion would be, without getting into the detail here, is that we ask the team to give us some sort of banding in terms of confidence about the numbers when we're further forward into the year. So whether that's 6 or 9 months. So we do have a better sense of how much volatility in their view there still is. And that would include, from my perspective, income also. Income for ourselves, and then remedy from the government support. This is, as I say, an unusual year, but I think for me, it would be good practice in any circumstance to have some sort of banding around the numbers. I know it's implicit, but I would certainly welcome having just a bit more on that next time we meet, if you and colleagues agree.
I'm not convinced we actually need a formal resolution to do that. If you wish to pursue the matter of a formal resolution, clearly that is for you. But I think if we were to just ask the Section 151 officer to ensure that that is a matter which is included within future reports, that perhaps we have some confidence limits on the expenditure and the income, which advises us of the likely risks. Then, if that assurance can be given, perhaps we don't need a formal resolution, unless.
From my perspective, Chair, why would we? We work very closely, don't we, with our officers. We absolutely trust their judgment. This is just about providing a bit more sense of where the judgment is situated. I'll just sort of remind you, and I know you, Chair, spent more time looking at this than many, that when we were going through the beginning of the pandemic, and the former chair of scrutiny to my right, 2 tables down, he enjoyed those evenings immensely. We did make a real determined effort to try and get a sense of the left and right of ARC. Now, we're a long way on from that, and government support is much more stable, but I think it's in that principle that we have some sort of sense. We don't need to make a resolution of it, as long as the team agree that that would be reasonable, and I'm sure they would. That would do for me. Thank you.
If I could come in, Chair. Yes, I mean, I think with the difficult situation, it's harder to forecast. And we could certainly provide more information about confidence limits when we come back for Q2. So we'll make sure we take that on board. Thank you.
Yeah, if we can have that request included within the minutes of the meeting, I think that should suffice. Clearly, we can have recommendations whenever we like, but they're really recommendations to ourselves. I think recommendations and resolutions are for other people to read of the work of the committee. And here we're setting ourselves a particular target to look at the confidence bands within which our forecasts rest. Are there any other comments from members of the committee? Can I welcome Councillor Hayter, who has defeated the traffic jam on the A12, no doubt.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, got here eventually.
If there are no more questions from members of the committee, I have one additional question, and that rises from, it's really a governance issue rather than an audit issue. It arises from the statement on 4.5 of the report concerning the missing of the targets on trade waste, where the issue of trade waste and the status of trade waste just passed through my mind, because as I understand it, trade waste is not a statutory duty for us to collect, although you may well advise me to the contrary. And in fact, it's I understand it's run as an activity designed to make a profit, which under the various localism acts and local government acts means it should be in a trading company if it's trading for profit. I just wondered whether there was any comment from our officers on the status of the trade waste and the losses on trade waste, and whether they perhaps should be part of our trading activities rather than floating around as an adjunct to the domestic waste service, which is a statutory requirement.
Would you like me to respond to that, Chairman? And again, Paul or Rosa might want to come in on this one, but I think there are a number of reasons for operating the service in-house, so to speak, or internally. Not least, there are VAT advantages. It means we can be competitive with other providers. We could have the service managed as a trading service within the Amphora companies. That isn't something that we've looked at before now, but certainly something we could consider. Like I say, Rosa may want to comment on that, but she's managing the trade waste collection service directly.
Yeah, so just maybe some context, I guess, in terms of the background. As you would appreciate, the commercial sector, so businesses have had their businesses impacted in the last 12 months, and that's obviously impacted the amount of waste that they're producing, and that therefore has impacted on the income that area of our service provides. But we're in a really good position. We've been supporting businesses and helping them through the recovery element of that. As Dan explained, there is no particular reason why the service is delivered through environment services of the council rather than the trading arm. But in terms of an operational service, it fits well within our service within the trade, the transfer station, the operational staff, the fleet, etc., works really well in terms of the service and the model that we provide within the council. But yeah, there is no particular reason for it to not operate within that service, other than it making sense from an operational perspective. And we're making changes to the way that the service will be delivered in terms of providing and supplying staff that will be specifically focused on that commercial element of that service going forward as well in due course.
Thank you for the answers. Clearly, it's there is a rationale for keeping it within the CBC portfolio rather than the trading company's portfolio. So perhaps I won't pursue that further this evening, but offline. So are there any final questions on the matter of the financial monitoring report? We were required to consider the financial report of the General Fund Services and the Housing Revenue Account for the first 3 months, and to note the forecast budget overspend of 164 on the General Fund. Is it agreed that we note but have no further comments? Thank you. We now move on to item 8, page 37 on the order paper. The capital monitoring report. Again, Paul Cook, and supported with a supplementary report from Rosa Tanfield. So, Paul, would you like to lead off on this?
Chairman, just before we do, sorry, I just wanted to declare an interest. I didn't do it at the beginning because I'm never quite sure, because we're told we ought not to keep declaring we're county councillors, but given my other position there, I think I just want to declare an interest, especially on the shrub end element. It talks about close collaboration with ECC. I'm not conscious there's any deal or plan yet, but I think I should just register that for the sake of openness.
Thank you. So if Paul Cook could, Head of Finance, could present the report, then perhaps we might go straight on to Rosa Tanfield, who has presented a paper on the matter of the refurbishment of Shrub End, which is quite an exciting project. So, Paul, the general report.
Thank you, Chair. So this again is the first quarterly monitoring report on capital for 21-22. In the table 5.1, it does show that of a forecast 84.6 million programme for 21-22, we have expended by the end of quarter 1 7.6 million, which is a slowish start. One can understand that because of COVID, labour and supply issues, and it's a similar position to last financial year. So I think we need to watch that quite carefully in quarters 2 and 3, that we do actually catch up to get a significant achievement of the programme. And then the report is in the standard format. So in the Appendix A, it sets out the main elements of the programme, row by row, and they are rated for progress on delivery, time, and cost. So you will see there are a few projects that have red ratings, and they are set out in the comments below the table, the reasons, and we have Rosa's additional report on Shrub End that you may well wish to consider. So that, Chair, is the report in summary, and welcome Rosa's report and any further questions. Thank you.
Can we go to Rosa for the report on Shrub End?
Okay, thank you. So the report appended as Appendix B sets out the background to funding that's being provided by the council to invest in improvements at Shrub End. And I'm pleased to say that after a bit of a faltering start to the progress of the project, we're making really good progress working to make improvements around compliance, health, safety and well-being for our workforce and the work that we do, but also with an eye to the future as well. It is proceeding, as I say, with a scope of works that's been agreed with a variety of different packages of works to ensure that we are fully compliant, as I say, and working as safely as we can. And in the coming weeks, we actually have work taking place, which will include a new crewing out shelter, car park improvements, new fencing and drainage works. We're continuing to work with CBH, who are project manager, to also undertake more detailed design work on the larger elements of the project, which will go out to tender and will determine the overall costs of the project. So good progress is being made in all areas. But what I would like to flag, as with all construction projects, there still remains some risks in relation to budget and timeline, and in particular in relation to construction materials, which we are seeing have an impact across the UK, let alone in Colchester. So we will continue to keep a really close eye on that, trying to specify materials that we know aren't as in high demand as possible, but obviously ensuring value for money and keeping it within the budget as close as possible. But overall, good progress is being made and action is actually taking place now at the site over the next few weeks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the report. Councillor Fox, you have a question. Can we first of all just look at the Shrub End matter, then go back to the main report? Was your question on the Shrub End? Can I ask a question on Shrub End then? There is clearly a need to carry out short-term work on that site. I visit it regularly to take my surplus garden refuse down there, and it does appear that our staff are working under trying circumstances at times. So in the short term, there is a need to improve the facilities, make it a more comfortable site to work from, a safer site to work from. But we also know that, for instance, the County Council is considering the transfer station at Ardley, and there is a lot of sort of double trafficking of waste across the borough. For instance, the garden waste goes all the way down to Shrub End, then it comes all the way back through the town up to Fordham and Wormingford, where some of it is composted, some of it goes to Birch, and there have always been recognised that there are advantages in having our operation closer to the County Council's transfer station, but that is a long-term project. So if what we see on Rosa's report is purely short-term, and any co-siting with the County Council transfer station is long-term, then that is okay. What I'm looking for is assurances that that is the position, because if the County Council scheme is going to go ahead fairly quickly, and because of the delays in building work and so on due to COVID, the Shrub End work was sort of slower off the mark than the report suggests. One can see there could possibly be a waste of taxpayers' funds by enhancing a site which has a very short life, although of course it's a very valuable site for other purposes. So I was just looking for an assurance at this point that the improvements are much needed, but are they going to have value over 5 years or so before future consideration is given to the future of the Shrub End site, and whether perhaps those operations should be at a more convenient location?
So if I can come back on that, the principles of the project is very much about an eye for the future, as I say. So you are right in that this is a sort of short to medium term project in terms of the work that we want to undertake, and wherever possible we're making sure that the work that we are doing is to meet the immediate need around health, safety, well-being, compliance, etc., as you would expect as a good authority should undertake, but also any more work beyond that, that it is either an additional asset to that site or something that could be moved or adapted if there were any change to site in the future. In terms of the longer term position of the site, that's still to be explored, and we have to have conversations with Essex County Council, and there are lots of things for us to consider. It's not just about the recycling and refuse operation. There is an ambition for the council to move to EV infrastructure, EV fleet, sorry, which will require infrastructure to support that, along with council's currently exploring an in-house delivery model for its grounds maintenance, and all of those factors alone, not in addition to the other external factors that we need to consider, such as the changes to the Environment Bill, which will have an implication on the recycling and refuse service in the future, all need to be taken into consideration to ensure that the site for the future is fit for purpose, taking all that into account. So there isn't anything that I can commit to today, but to assure you that all of those things are in consideration as part of this project now, so that we aren't wasting taxpayers' money, as you say, but also making sure that we can be flexible for any changes going forward as well, and support any conversations about changes to the site or potential new sites if that were to be the case.
Thank you very much for those reassurances. Can I ask the portfolio holder for resources whether there is anything she would wish to add?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to add, it was the first question that I asked. We do not want to spend money that is going to be scrapped in the very near future, but I was assured that this particular project can be moved if necessary, but it is necessary for now. I was actually with Councillor Crowe at the site last night, where we had a very, very good tour, and we could see the difference that these improvements were going to make. Just the what we sort of call the market stalls that are being installed so that the crews can gather together in safety but distanced and outside, ready for their trucks to come and pick them up, is going to be a great asset. We had a good tour of the site. I've also met on site with Councillor Malcolm Buckley, who is the Essex County Council Cabinet Member for Waste and Environment, to discuss the long-term future, because this is something that is very much top of my list. We can blame the Environment Bill, and we know that is coming up. We know that there's going to be changes, but there will always be something that will stop us actually getting to grips with this. And I feel in the past that we haven't worked well together with Essex County Council in trying to understand the site, utilise it, and make it the best site possible for the 21st century.
Colleagues, questions on Shrub End? Councillor King.
Thank you. It's less a question than a commentary, given that's, I think, quite right, given the paper. I just want to sort of say that this is one of the first things I came across when I joined the council in 2018. And it's, to me, extraordinary it's taken us so long. But it's really great that we have, adapting it to the circumstances we're in, we now have a scheme that's going to provide a material benefit. People told me that they were ashamed they'd rather forgotten our workforce and the place up there. And this is not a non-political point, it just, these things can happen. It's taken us a while to get to grips. So I say this only to say, it's really clear to me we must do this. Short and medium term investments in the place and our people, when we know the problems we have about their retention, that seems to me unarguable. So I just want to make it plain from my perspective, the way we should work on this is to be supportive of the proposal. I don't have no challenge to it at all. It's overdue. That might be my challenge, and that's to myself as much as anybody else. So I'm just really pleased that this is at last about to happen. I look forward to happening in this financial year. There is no schedule. I understand why we have to go through a contracting process, but as soon as we could get one, it would be good to see, wouldn't it? So we know it will happen. I personally also welcome anything that can be done to break down what has always appeared to me to be an artificial divide between county and CBC when it's come to issues of waste and site management. Everybody acknowledges we could do it more effectively, and yet it doesn't quite happen. So again, very open-minded about where you might get to, Sue, on that with your colleagues. I hope that you can get a better joint working. But my third and last point is whatever we do about ways of working with county, they absolutely must not be to the detriment of the quality of waste recovery and recycling. We've got a stellar record in Colchester. We've struggled a bit like many have the last year, but it is a stellar one compared to other nearby local authorities, one of the best in the east of England. We should be proud of that. That should be absolutely the test before we do anything about a new relationship and management of waste is what will that do to our recycling rates. Now we're on the brink of actually seismic change, don't we know it? Debated in the chamber, we've got to make sure that whatever we do pushes up those rates of recovery rather than impacts in any other way. Thank you.
Any further contributions on this item? The matter of action on Shrub End is, of course, a cabinet decision, and we have yet to see the outline of the decision. This was a briefing paper which we asked for from Rosa because we know that there is a value for money issue which rightly falls within our purview to look at. And so the paper here is purely for us to note this evening. We don't have to take any decision other than noting and convincing ourselves that this is a value for money project. But of course, we do look forward to seeing the report from Cabinet and the decision from Cabinet, which we may or may not comment on. So is it agreed that we note the issues arriving from Shrub End? Thank you. Can we now go back to the generality of the report on the capital expenditure monitor, where Councillor Fox staked a claim to be first off the mark?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for remembering to come back to me. I wanted to ask some specifics around the potential for labour shortages and supply issues to cause difficulties in the capital budget, and the extent to which inflation may cause some cost issues in the budget, and whether any specific work has been done on the risk of inflationary pressures in the budget causing some of those projects to go over budget or be undeliverable.
Would you like me to come in on that one, Chair, or Dan may wish to add? But certainly, we are aware there are inflation and supply risks. Some of the projects in the programme have already been tendered, so then it becomes more of a delivery issue. But we will need to look carefully at what tenders we're getting back for other projects. So our comprehensive review of the capital programme would come in setting the 22-23 budget. So we'll certainly be looking at very carefully towards the end of the year. So we're well aware of those issues, and we're working on them at this stage. I don't know if Dan wanted to add anything.
I don't think there's much to add to that, Chairman, other than we are obviously looking at it very closely. Clearly, this is a Q1 monitoring report, and I think some of the issues you're referring to are, starting to be noticed across some of our projects as we get tender returns. So I'm sure we'll be able to say more at the Q2 report stage.
If I could just come back, Chair, on that, because in some of the specifics on within the report on the comments on the AMBER rated schemes for property purchases. So the 100 Homes project says that property prices have increased significantly since the programme started, and purchases of properties within the HRA project haven't started yet because the focus has been on the 100 Homes project. Is the risk that the number of properties might not be reached within that budget? We know that property prices, particularly locally, have increased significantly. All the data suggests that property prices are not slowing down, and that the properties that we're likely to be buying back are properties that would be in demand as well, and whether those projects might not achieve the numbers that originally set out as a result of that.
If I could come in on that one, Chair, I think that is a good example of how we would do a more comprehensive review in revising the programme for 22-23, and there is the factor that on all projects, there may be cost variations up or down, which should pick up at that time. If the potential variation was at a very significant level, we might point that out specifically to Cabinet. But I think, we really would wait until setting next year's programme. And as Dan was explaining, later quarters monitoring reports before making any major revision in the delivery of that programme.
Thank you, Chair.
Following on from Councillor Fox's question, in paragraph 4.1, it says that the capital programme was reset. Does that mean it was just looked at from the point of view of scope, or was there a comprehensive review of how prices were likely to rise during the year? And if so, have those predictions come reasonably true? Because there are so many scare stories on TV at the moment about costs really escalating and building projects grinding to a halt. Now, I hope that all our predictions were more professional than we hear from the tabloid press. But it would appear that there is very significant inflation in the building trade, also lack of materials, bricks and so forth, that are just not available for months now. I just wanted to check that all those type of factors have been included to the best of our ability in the RAG assessment of projects that we have before us this evening.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, at an earlier stage, the risks seem to be, whether projects could be delivered at all, not the costs, but in some ways, fortunately, because of economic recovery, we've now got a different set of issues to address. So we'll pick those up when we carry out the next quarter's monitoring, but also in the reset, where we look fundamentally at each project to give it what we regard as our best assessment of the delivery cost. So yes, it will be gone into thoroughly. We've got a standard system to assess capital programme requirements moving forward for the budget. And there is challenge in officer machinery on project owners' estimates. So I think we'll try to give good emphasis to those in future quarters monitoring and the reset.
Thank you for those reassurances. Councillor Bentley.
Chair, thank you very much indeed. Just three very quick points. First of all, I just want to commend officers on the excellent way this paper is laid out, and the previous paper as well. It's very easy to understand. I have sat many years in this authority where they weren't quite as easy to understand as they are now. So great work by Mr. Cook and his team, and a great thanks, I think, certainly from me, and I hope from the rest of the committee. The next point really is really to follow up what Councillor Fox was saying. I do think where we are at the moment, we should be running a risk register that's published certainly next to all of these projects. We know there are shortages for lots of reasons, one to do with HGV drivers, others shortage of supplies. And if that is going to have an impact on any of the work that we are doing, I think we should be monitoring that and having that as a report alongside this. It might not be, I don't know, but on the other hand, I don't know either. So it'd be good to have that so we have clarity. You know, on behalf of the public, we should be making sure we are asking those questions and the public have a full sight of that issue. So a risk register, I think, and it might be there, just it's not on this report, I think would be useful. My final point is a little bit more parochial, certainly onto a project which is the Stanway Community Centre, which of course I note has a shortfall of money. And when I see things that the budget is being looked at through value engineering options, that's shorthand normally for cutting things out, in my experience. Also, I'm reflective that I think it wasn't so many years ago that a large amount of money, I believe it was 106, but I'll stand to be correct, was transferred from Stanway to Mile End. And I'm just wondering whether we think that was still a good idea when we see this, given the fact that Stanway is probably one of the fastest expanding areas of the whole of East Anglia at the moment, and another community centre is beneficial for people who are moving into Stanway, West Stanway, and the borders of Cotford are asking for this as well. So I want to know, given all that, we've passed the time when this building should be underway, what confidence we have that any shortfall will be made up, and from where, please?
Thank you, Chair. So when schemes are brought into the capital programme, we make funding assumptions so we can calculate our budget. But obviously the funding mix can change as the scheme goes forward, and the value of the scheme can change also. So for Stanway, we would expect to pick that up at the next review. On risks, obviously we have our corporate risk approach, and we would want to coordinate anything we do on the capital programme specifically with that. What we need to do is find a good presentation that doesn't add too much value to every single project as a risk figure, because it might be quite alarming, but get something where we work into the central case, but we have an understanding of what those risks are going forward. So we'll certainly look at that for the next quarter's monitoring report.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I echo the suggestion just made. This is not about asking clearly for unnecessary work. It's just saying in the times we're in, it's the earlier conversation, a bit more understanding around the pressures and how they've been factored into the budgetary position should help managers, should help cabinet, should help us. I had some responsibility for this until May. It's clearly gone to rats in the last 5 weeks after that. But, there were lots of acknowledged pressures, and these aren't new. Dan, I welcome your commitment to, or your statement that later this year there's going to be a full-hearted review, because that pressure and that need to do that work was plain some months ago. We've all been in a degree of suspension from my perspective due to pandemic. We have to take stock, and really that's the point that I think Councillor Bentley in many respects is making. We need to take stock and get confidence that this is a deliverable programme, or make adjustment if it's not. If we were to take this chair, this set of projects with the degree of amber and red in front of any board in the country, they will be alarmed. Now, we trust that we can do this. We trust that amber and red doesn't mean a meltdown. What it means is we've got significant pressures to manage, but we do need confidence, in my view, that they are going to be factored into that discussion at the end of the year. We know the new facts, including schedule and delivery, when we come to sort of the annual full council endorsement of the capital programme. This is not to have any go at great people doing a difficult job in very difficult circumstances, but I really look forward to that reassessment later this year, Chair, and it will be good to see that work, the results of it come back here with just a bit more on risk and contingency and how it's factored in. I think that will do for me. That's my sort of most specific, most general kind of point. I do want to welcome the fact that town deal projects will eventually be listed, factored and seen. That's been reflected in the scrutiny, and I think the importance of them in terms of the delivery, that would matter to all of us. So that will do for me, Chair. Thank you very much.
Just to respond, Chairman, to Councillor King's invitation, I would like to say that I don't find the risks as presented in the report alarming. I would be more alarmed if there were more green, because it would demonstrate a lack of transparency. What we've got here is a very clear, I hope, demonstration to the committee of the various risks applied across the whole programme, with comments on both the red and amber risks. So I hope that it has given you enough information to have a much better understanding of what's going on. As I mentioned before, this is a Q1 report, and some of the issues and risks that we've been talking about are actually more recent phenomena, things which have come out very much in the last couple of months. So as I said, that will be, I'm sure, a strong feature of the next monitoring report. But also just to say that this is monitored very regularly. We have a senior management team looking at this programme every month. We have programme owners and programme sponsors within our officer corps who are looking at this more frequently than that. And we have, as you know, a project management system which gives us the ability to look at progress reports and interrogate those very regularly. So I would want to reassure the committee that we are all over this. It's not to say that the risks aren't there. They are. We are managing them. And where you see an amber risk, that is a risk that is being managed. Where it's red, we've got more concerns, and those are explained in the report. Just finally to say that we will be looking at a more thorough reset of the capital programme, which we did last year in January, or this year in January. We'll be doing that again as part of the budget process, as Mr. Cook explained.
Thank you. Can I ask a couple of questions about specific schemes? The first question is in regard to mandatory disabled facility grants on page 44. While the explanation for why this is in is marked red is perfectly satisfactory, and it sort of tells us why. So the issue to me is that this has been going on as a reddish issue for a long time, and I wonder whether there is any prospect in resolving the backlog, which presumably means we need more funds in this area, but also, as is indicated in the dialogue, we are seeing an inability to actually get bricks and mortar down to effect the additional facilities needed by disabled so that they can occupy relatively normal premises. Is there any further commentary on when this particular project is likely to normalise?
If I could come in, Chair, it is regrettable that we have this backlog of using the funding. However, we have recently made progress with MHCLG on the flexibility to use the resource. So that will help us deal more efficiently with the resource and get a better programme. So I think we can perhaps set that out in more detail in Q2 monitoring. So the position is turning round, but we would like it to happen more quickly. But I think there is improvement now because of the wider scope that is allowed by MHCLG's new approach on regulations.
Thank you. My second question on specific projects is to do, sorry, I haven't got a mouse with me this evening, so I'm finding it difficult to negotiate my laptop. Right, on page 46, there are two projects: the light fleet replacement and the fleet upgrade for caged tippers. The one project is just slightly delayed. The other one seems to be in the mire. The fleet upgrade for caged tippers, where the contractor doesn't seem to be moving forward. We're looking to the prospect of cancelling the order and procuring from another manufacturer. Again, this is an issue which cuts across our audit and our governance role, because the council, from the governance point of view, has passed a climate emergency resolution requiring us to do lots of things to ensure that we make Colchester a greener and healthier, safer place and cut down on CO2 emissions. But we're mindful that both the light fleet replacement and also the fleet upgrade of caged tippers are both procuring vehicles which have internal combustion engines rather than a more eco-friendly approach. Now, in the case of the possibility of re-tendering the fleet upgrade for caged tippers to a different manufacturer, it presents the opportunity for the council to fall in line with its own climate emergency resolution and procure electric vehicles. And I inquire whether this would be a suitable juncture to say, because these two schemes are both red at the moment, Cabinet may well like to take another look at them and decide whether we really do wish to procure engine or vehicles with engines which have internal combustion rather than electric or hydrogen powered vehicles. So is there an opportunity, do our officers have any view on whether, given that these projects are both red, there is an opportunity to do more on climate emergency compliance?
I'll offer a view, Chairman, to start with. Rosa might want to come in again, as this is her area, but just to say that, I mean, they're amber, they're not red. Those schemes are consistent with the fleet transition strategy that the council has, which will get us to net zero carbon by 2030. I would hazard a guess that to re-specify those procurements at this stage would further delay them. So I think that would be the risk, notwithstanding, obviously we all understand the importance and the desire to shift to zero carbon as soon as possible. The reason that contract was set out in that specification was because of the lack of available vehicles on the market. So I understand what you're saying about taking the opportunity, but I think that would probably further delay the contract, and operationally that would present us with further delays and difficulties, as well as increased costs. But Rosa might want to add to that.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, just to outline those two projects, the cage tippers is one project, and we have moved on actually since the report has been produced, and we've moved further forward with the contractor, the supplier, and actually we're now moving into more of a green project with this and progressing well with that. The other project that you mentioned is actually the light fleet, which is our EV, and that's our first step to bringing in an EV fleet, apologies, and the complexities with that project is making sure that we have the infrastructure to ensure that we can provide that fleet, and the infrastructure to provide that fleet is going to be provided from Rowan House, and there is a project to do works at Rowan House, so we need to make sure that those two projects work side by side to ensure that there isn't a delay on each of those projects. So it's just working alongside that particular project to ensure that we can introduce the EV fleet as quickly as possible and make some good progress in that area of our work, and start understanding the impact, the changes, and bringing EV fleet into our services is going to be. So just wanted to confirm that.
Thank you. Are there any other comments Councillor Tate.
It's just for my own understanding, really. Page 47, I just after a piece of clarity, really. Private sector renewals, the delay in timing, cost and delivery is down to Northgate will require time to configure. What's Northgate, please?
Dan, can you help us?
Sorry, it's an IT system.
And what does it do?
I don't think I won't attempt to answer the question here, Chairman. If it's helpful, I'm happy to provide some information on that system. It's quite complex, so thank you.
Neatly dodged. Any other comments from colleagues on the capital expenditure monitor? So the action required to review the progress of the capital programme as set out in the report, the associated spend for the first quarter and the budget's forecast for future years, to review the RAG rating of each scheme as requested by the relevant project manager. That we have done. So we just we note the report. Thank you. We now move on to item 9, Treasury Management. This is a rather technical item, but a very important one. Those of us who've been around some time remember when the council sort of lost £4 million to an Icelandic bank and took a long time to recover it. Shortly after, we all got very keen on Treasury management policies to ensure that such an occurrence never occurred again, and it certainly has not. The policies are relatively static, although the investment programme, where the money is put, changes from time to time. Paul Cook is leading on this. Mark Jarvis will answer any additional questions.
Thank you, Chair. 2021 was actually quite an exciting year for Treasury Management for all the right reasons, because we had a lot of payments from government, COVID grants, business rate relief funding. So it was quite a fast-moving year. And when MHCLG pays out hundreds of millions of pounds to 500 local authorities without more than a day's warning, it's quite a difficult task to invest that money sensibly on the money markets. So I think it's a great result from the team that they've delivered a very successful treasury management strategy. So that would be Mark, who's with you to answer any technical questions, supported by Zoe Latham and Georgia Norton have done a fantastic job, in my opinion, and are continuing to do so in 21-22. So the report sets out performance against all the main indicators, and because of capital programme delays, we did not expend at the level we anticipated, and we therefore did not need to borrow at that level. And in the executive summary, we also refer to the Turnstone development, which is about to come into operation in terms of signing the agreement, which could have an impact on the 21-22, the next year's treasury management strategy, which we may then need to bring forward. So very successful year in terms of treasury management, and certainly any detailed questions, I'm sure Mark will be only too glad to respond. Thank you.
Are there any significant changes to the policy that we should be aware of? I mean, it is a highly technical subject, difficult for lay people to spot any what appears to be quite insignificant issues, but which might have significant effect on the safety of our investments. So just inquiring whether there are in the text any matters of significant change to policy on Treasury management.
I don't think so much major Treasury changes, but Mark, perhaps you'd like to come in on that one.
Thanks, Paul. Basically, no, there was no real major change in strategy. No, the council has got a low risk appetite for investments. We continue to use our PWB option for borrowing or potentially internally borrow where we can. And that has brought about a saving in the actual interest budget of 133k. But to answer your question, Councillor Willett, there's no changes to the Treasury management strategy for 2021.
Colleagues, are there any questions on either the policy and the strategy or the actual placement of funds, remembering that some of those are confidential? Councillor King.
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul, Mark, for all the work you've done. It's been an extraordinary time for you with your advisors to navigate, and applaud how you've managed our finances for us. And again, as Councillor Bentley remarked on the clarity in recent times of the reporting, it makes the indigestible just a bit closer to understandable. So I thank you for that. Don't ask any questions. I might fail and so might others. Paul, I'd like to ask you or Mark perhaps just a bit of context and to help us all, I think. We talk about borrowing limits, and the conversation that was had certainly a year or so ago, some might remember, which was around how close were we to the limit of what we could do as a local authority. And I wonder if you could just talk us through. I always understood that we had a reasonable margin, so that the next bit of borrowing was not only underpinned by the assets and what we were doing, but it was affordable. And affordable in terms of, as I say, the volume of borrowing we could undertake as a local authority. Could you help the committee, and I think for the record, just give us some sense of that, if that's possible? And I might have a second point, Chair, afterwards, if I may.
If I could just kick off on affordability. I mean, a lot of our borrowing relates to the housing revenue account, and we've got 30-year business plan that we're constantly updating, demonstrating affordability there. And on the rest of the capital programme, this is part of our annual reset that we ensure that in the medium-term financial forecast, we do have sufficient provision for all our planned borrowing requirements. So we do look very carefully at affordability. And as part of budget setting, we comment on the robustness of the budget, and that is one of the key elements. Mark, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Thanks, Paul. Talking about affordability, there is an indicator in the Treasury Management report that details what portion of debt is against our net budget. And given the growth in our capital programme, that has increased. But obviously, moving forward, we need to be really careful about how much we borrow and how much potentially borrowing cost impacts our budget. So obviously, as Paul said, as part of the resetting the budget, it is reviewed on an annual basis.
You have a second question?
I did, Chair. Turnstone, there's very little detail here, that's fine. But I assume that we're still on track with that intention. And that in itself, the fact that we may need to adjust our borrowing limit to reflect that fact is not something we should be concerned about, or otherwise.
No, that is the case, Chair. It's a technical requirement that part of the Turnstone funding we would need to account for against these limits. But the scheme is going forward as reported to the Cabinet, both in the open agenda and in the confidential agenda.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Well, we have the assurance that there are no significant changes to our Treasury Management policy, which has served us well in the past. We have heard the explanations about the uniqueness of this year. I guess every year is unique, but this one's been more unique than any others in terms of its impact on the cash going in and out of the council's coffers. And it would appear from our questioning that all is well. So the committee was asked to consider the report as part of the cycle of monitoring Treasury Management, covers all borrowing investments. We've considered and noted the report. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. I should have spelt out the actions, of course. The committee is asked to note the Treasury Management strategy, to note the Council's increase in borrowing to fund the capital programme. The committee is asked to note the satisfactory performance of Link Asset Management Services. We didn't hear much about them, but they're just the advisor which gives sort of helpful professional advice to our officers on the investment strategy. We now move to item 10 on the order paper, page 73. To hear the sad saga of the revised table to finalise the audit of the statement of accounts for 2020-21, where again we look to Paul Cook to tell us the bad news.
Thank you, Chair. Yet another wearisome finance report. I mean, this is a bit of a mixed package because the team did very, very well in preparing the draft statement of accounts within a very tight timetable, despite all the pressures of addressing COVID in terms of treasury management and budgeting. Unfortunately, and it is both an Essex-wide and a national issue, BDO are delayed in conducting their audits. So we had expected to come to this committee with the audit opinion, but now following discussions with BDO and the lead partner, we aim to come back in November. So I don't think anybody in the team can remember a situation where the Colchester accounts were actually late going to committee, certainly not for many, many years. So it is extremely unfortunate. It's quite difficult really for us to do anything about it other than do our best with the external auditors to provide them with the facilities and all the information they need. And they assure us that they will be ready to come to the November committee. So as the report sets out, we will need to publish on the council's website reason for delay, and we'll keep working with the external auditors and bring forward the report on the 17th of November. Mark does a lot of the detailed discussions with BDO. May wish to add?
Thanks, Paul. So just so you're aware, the audit has commenced. So I'm aware that the audit partner and the finance manager have started work in Colchester. The plan is to finish the main work by the end of October. That'll give enough time for the auditors to provide their audit reports, for us to comment and present to committee in late November.
Thank you for that report. It is particularly galling that our officers pull out all the stops and ensure that all the work we have to do to support the audit is done to quality, to time, and everything is ready to go. Just as we think we've won the battle, we're then told that the external auditor cannot carry out their next stage of the work. And clearly, I'm very annoyed that that happens. Although there's little we can do to the auditor not being here, we can't vent our anger on them. But I'm sure our view has been communicated. Councillor Bentley.
Chair, thank you. Well, certainly we must commend our officers for doing all they can to get the preparation of the work done. I suppose in a state of fairness, do we know why there is a delay? Has that been explained to us? And secondly, will that be reflected in the fee note from BDO to us?
As to the second, Chair, unfortunately, I don't think the fee will be reduced. In fact, all the mood music from MHCLG is that audit fees are likely to increase over the next few years. The reasons, partly overrunning audits in other authorities, and some of the factors set out in section 4.1 of the report don't really address sort of lack of resource to carry out the audits, and generally I think the planning has been somewhat unsatisfactory. But it is a national issue that is being looked at by MHCLG and public sector audit appointments, and the new potential regulatory body for external audit known as ARGA, which is not a kitchen range, it's a regulatory body. So we hope for better results moving forward, but we're having to watch that quite carefully.
Why don't I just second bite of the cherry? So thank you, Mr. Cook, and I think you've tempered your comments very well there. I just wonder though, do we just kind of accept that that's okay, or do we as politicians representing the public decide that either a letter from you, strongly worded, Chair, to BDO and to the Secretary of State for MHCLG and all the leaders should be sent? Because if you don't protest, nothing happens. If you make a comment and say, actually, we have very hard-working local government officers who've really done a lot of work here. There could be lots of reasons why BDO in this particular case, it could well be COVID-related too, for all I know. There is no explanation that I can see anyway, of this work being delayed, but I think we need to express that because it could be next year and then the year after, because as far as the public is concerned, it looks like it's our failure for delivering late accounts that are audited. So I just wonder whether a strongly worded letter from yourself or the leader should go forth to both organisations.
Councillor Fox, you got your pen ready to write the letter.
Not at all, Chair. I think if the letter is to be written, it should come from yourself as the Chair of the committee, and all the weight that you have with holding that position. But I just wanted to back up what Councillor Bentley was saying. I think that we shouldn't just accept this, and I think, you know, ultimately, if there isn't enough resource in the auditing system, then and fees need to rise, as a result, then that is just one of the unfortunate costs that we'll have to swallow as an authority. But having our accounts audited is an important part of good governance, and we are clearly not the only authority in this position. And I think unless we make it clear, because it's not in our power to do anything about it, this is outside of our control, that we do write BDO are probably part of, it feels to me like ourselves and BDO are sort of victims to the system, and that we really ought to write to PSAA and the Secretary of State to put on record our displeasure at the state of the system, and I wouldn't, and personally, Chair, I would copy those letters to our local members of Parliament as well, because they then have the ability to hold the ministry to account through their offices as well. And that they're made aware of what the situation is locally. This is not going to get any traction on the doorstep when we talk to voters about the issues that matter to them, but it is fundamental to good governance that our accounts are audited properly, that they're audited in time, so that if any issues are highlighted, we can put those right as an authority. So I would back up Councillor Bentley's proposal that we put our thoughts in the strongest and politest possible way to those our masters that, you know, have the ability to make sure that the system runs properly.
So it's proposed by two members that we put on record our concerns strongly but politely to all those concerned. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? Councillor King.
Only to make it plain that this is, of course, cross-party, and there's one extra little adjunct just to make very plain that our officers were ready. It's not just that they were late, we were ready. And that's an excellent performance. So that side as well. I know it'll be natural drafting. No, absolutely, we're united on this. If you say nothing, you're asking for more of the same. Let's not do it for the reasons described by Councillor Fox and Bentley.
Thank you, colleagues. So the action required, firstly, to note the revised timetable. Secondly, to note the requirements to issue a public notice about the late publication of the statement, and the additional proposal from colleagues that we put on record in the letter our concerns, strong and polite way to everyone involved. Do you agree that those courses of action? Thank you. We now move on to item 11, review of the Council's processing of special categories and criminal convictions, personal data policy, where Nicola Cook is addressing us.
Good evening. Hello?
We can hear you, Nicola.
You can hear me, thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to check that you could. So we have a need as an authority to have a policy that covers the processing of our special category and criminal convictions data. This is a requirement of the Data Protection Act 2018. To date, we haven't had it, so this is a new policy that we're asking you to look, review and approve. It covers details of the additional information that we process in certain circumstances, that being the distinction between personal data and special category data, in addition to the criminal convictions information. There are only certain areas of the council that do process this kind of information routinely, but there is the requirement that we make sure there are extra measures in place to ensure the security of that personal data. And this policy is detailing what measures we intend to have in place and what responsibilities each area of the council have.
Thank you. The glossy brochure which accompanies the committee report certainly sets it out extremely clearly and extremely well. I was surprised that those issues which come under the definition of the special category data were not already covered by our procedures. So I thought most of those were already personal data which needed to be well protected. But I guess this is just adding extra layers of protection and processing to go with it. So to what extent is there a sort of a real change in what we have to do to comply with the 2018 definition of special category data?
Thank you. In terms of our processing and our procedures, they are already in line with the requirements of the legislation. But the legislation, when it was first published, there was quite a lot of ambiguity around whether your existing data protection policy would cover the processing of special category data or not. We, like many other councils, included the stuff around special category data and criminal convictions data in our existing data protection policy. In the interim, the Information Commissioner's Office has produced some guidance which says that they need to be 2 separate documents. So in terms of our processes and procedures, we are following the correct processes. This data is already identified. We're following all other parts of the legislation with regard to documenting what we have, knowing what we have, having the appropriate controls in place, and having more controls in place to cover that data that is special category or criminal convictions. What we didn't have was a separate policy document that stated that what we do with regard to that data. This was picked up by an external audit we had recently of our data protection provisions. It didn't come up with any other recommendations around special category or criminal convictions data, other than the fact that we did not have this document as separate, and that we needed to have that in place.
Councillor Bentley.
Well, thank you, Chair. It just strikes me that actually this is a good piece of tidying up our processes, and I think we should just accept the report unless there's other comments, but I think it's a well laid out piece of work and explains exactly what needs to be done. We just heard why it's got to be done, and I think that's correct. We've acted appropriately.
Any other comments? Can I ask a follow-on question then? Given that we're already protecting most of this information, but we have to sort of state separately that that we are attending to the safeguarding of the special category data, does it mean any changes to our information processing systems or the policies in regard to the information processing systems? In other words, is it going to cause any major impact on our IT systems, or is this just, as I think you were hinting, regularizing our policy so that it accords in every detail with what is required by the 2018 Act?
The latter. So we already do an assessment when we change a system or introduce a new system. It's called a data protection impact assessment. So that's conducted for any new system or a change to existing system. And in that we cover an extra section if that system is due to be containing any of the special category or criminal convictions information. We already have safeguards in place with regard to our SharePoint environment, which is another place that a lot of this data can be held. And that's normally around having the conversations with the service area about setting appropriate permissions and safeguarding that information. So in terms of procedures and ability of the systems to keep up, we are also seeing that a lot of suppliers are starting to put in place additional measures within their systems to control the use of personal data and to protect it. And at contract procurement, we are now asking what measures suppliers have in place for ensuring that data, particularly in cloud-based systems with remote access, that the data is secured, and gaining that assurance when we procure new IT systems.
That seems an eminently sensible way to proceed to implement this particular policy. Colleagues, any final comments around the table? So the decision is we recommend to full council that the processing of special category and criminal convictions personal data policy attached Appendix A to the report be adopted and approved for inclusion in the council's policy framework. Is that your wish? Thank you. And we now come to the last item on the agenda, which is our review of the work programme for the remainder of the year. Matthew Evans will advise us.
Thank you, Chair. This is, as you're aware, a fairly standard item, comes to every meeting. Members are simply asked to note the proposed work programme for the rest of the municipal year. The only thing I would draw your attention to is the Colchester Borough Homes annual report and governance statement was due to be considered at this meeting, but has now been moved to the next meeting of this committee in October. And other than that, it's as things were. Thank you.
Any councillors have comments on the work programme or additions, suggestions, good ideas? In the absence of any of those, can we agree to note the report? Thank you. And that brings us to the end of the order paper. Can I thank you for your participation this evening and getting through the decisions, and wish you a safe journey home, particularly those of you who are going back along the A12 like Councillor Hayter. Thank you.